One of the most controversial decisions Labour has made in its early days of this new government is the early release scheme for prisoners, ostensibly because of the issue of overcrowding as well as to save money, supposedly. This is a very controversial policy for obvious reasons. People do not like the idea of potentially dangerous criminals being on the streets and people who've committed serious crimes getting early release. I got the Daily Telegraph the other day. It's quite a striking cover. It's not a paper I would usually buy. It's a pretty Tory paper. I'm not Tory, but this is what was on the cover. Cheers, Care. This charming character, Jason Hogginson, 53, was freed from HMP Durham yesterday as part of Sir Keir Starmer's efforts to tackle prison overcrowding. He had been jailed for assaulting his ex-partner, and I'll go into the report. If you bear with me, it's not excessively long. Charles Hymas and Albert Tate are the reporters. On December 11th last year, Jason Hogginson was caught on camera assaulting his former girlfriend in the street. Yesterday morning, he walked free from HMP Durham. The heavily tattooed criminal, who has 109 previous convictions, raised a big thumbs up to the waiting press as he left the prison under Sir Keir Starmer's early release scheme. Obviously, tattoos don't make a criminal. They're just saying that's you notice. I mean, you can't miss it. Across the country, relatives and friends cheered at prison gates and sprayed inmates with sparkling wine as up to 1,750 prisoners were freed after serving 40% of their sentences instead of half. Even half would be controversial, but 40%. One of them, Lawson Naity, a killer convicted of manslaughter over a machete attack, was judge eligible for the scheme because he was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in jail below the 4 year threshold that would have seen him excluded. He was charged because he bought a knife online that was then used to kill 14-year-old Gordon Galt in a fight in Newcastle in November 2022. Gordon's mother said it was sickening that her son's killer had been let out early. Nazi, 18, is Belgian and faces deportation. He is understood to have been transferred to an immigration detention centre. Offenders convicted of violence, even if it's manslaughter, are eligible for the early release scheme as long as the sentence is not more than 4 years. Sex offenders, terrorists, and those convicted of domestic abuse offences, such as stalking and coercive control, are excluded, except it obviously didn't exclude Hopkinson, who assaulted his girlfriend in the street. That's surely domestic abuse, but that he was spared from that exclusion. There was a party atmosphere at jails where inmates were being released. Prisoners thanked the Prime Minister and praised Labour for the policy. At HMP Wandsworth, Liam Fitzpatrick, 34, celebrated his release from a 3 year sentence for assault and driving offences with his arms aloft, saying, "I'm grateful to Starmer. I'm a lifelong Labour supporter. Out with the old, in with the new. There's been a lot of happy people today. I'm Labour through and through." He said he had been behind bars for a driving offence and fighting. Outside HMP ISIS, if I'm not misreading that, that's the name of it, in southeast London, Jabar, that's Djaber, Banalawa, if they could pronounce that, 20, a convicted drug dealer freed 6 months early from his 2.5 year sentence, said he would now be a lifelong Labour voter and boasted he was going to get lit, a slang term for intoxicated. "I thank Labour because I've come out earlier than I was supposed to. I'm just happy it's a very good policy because it's given a lot of prisoners a lot of hope," he said. "Some released prisoners they admitted they expected to be back. I don't want to reoffend, but getting recalled, I'm 99% sure," said one freed from HMP Brixton after serving 5 months for assault. It's believed that some inmates who were homeless on release could be temporarily placed in taxpayer-funded hotels if there was not enough space in bail hotels. One homeless prisoner told the Telegraph he would be sleeping on a park bench last night and would end up returning to prison after he was released early without sorting any accommodation. Jack Creighton, 54, who said he was in and out of prison constantly for, and then the report continues, but you get the idea. Um, the first thing, I'll get into the policy itself in a minute because, of course, Labour isn't just doing this for fun, there is a context to it, and I will come to that. The thing I found rather galling is instead of sort of keeping their heads down and saying, "Okay, we're out, let's make the most of it," these people are gloating at the victims by celebrating outside prison gates, so publicly, so um, so crudely. I mean, if they had any remorse for their crimes, any sincere remorse, they would keep their head low, go back home and just, you know, try and find the light, try and reform themselves. But instead, they're celebrating, they're gloating about this, they're thanking Starmer, which I'm sure he will not be taking that thanks with any comfort. Um, so that bit I find quite striking. Um, so the context. There is a problem with overcrowding in our prisons. There's no escaping from that. I'm hardline on crime. I believe bad people belong behind bars. But we can't escape from the fact there is an overcrowding crisis. And it's a problem because if you have more inmates put in, say you have a cell for two inmates, and there's four in that cell, that inevitably leads to tension. It puts more pressure on the prison staff. I have huge sympathy for those people. You know, they're often forgotten in all of these debates about prison. The prison staff really are on the front line with this. They're often victims of assault. They're the people who have to deal with riots when they break out. You know, they really are on the front line. So overcrowding isn't good for anyone. It puts pressure on the staff, and yes, it puts pressure on inmates. I That's not something I would welcome. I mean, I think people should be punished, but I don't think it should be more uncomfortable than it needs to be. I don't think it should be comfortable, but I don't think it should be inhumane either. And whilst our prisons are not comparable to some parts of the world, they're also worse than in many other parts of Europe. So I my basic attitude to prison is it does serve a purpose. It's to keep the public safe from dangerous people. It's to punish guilty people. But there should also be purposes beyond that. And if it's simply a brutal place, you know, we have rats running around where cells are overcrowded, then it's not going to help much in terms of forming the criminal when they come out. I think the answer is to build more prisons. That eases the space issue. Labour has said they'll do this, so they have to follow up on it. Obviously, it's not going to happen overnight. The Tories are quick to jump on Labour over this, but they had 14 years to sort out this problem, and they didn't do enough. They built some more prisons, but they haven't dealt with the overcrowding situation. I actually think instead of building more prisons, I think it would be preferable to expand current prisons. Because building new prisons somewhere, inevitably people living there will not like it. Uh, but a prison has to be somewhere. Now, existing Victorian prisons often have poor conditions. Um, I say let's expand them in order to ease the overcrowding issue, but also, you know, while prisoners are transferred to another part of the prison, then they could deal with the sanitation problems and the other issues that are there. It's not perfect. There is no easy answer to this, but I am not convinced that freeing potentially dangerous people is a long-term solution. Um, there will be some on the Liberal left, like the prisons minister, Lord Timpson, whose attitude is we jail far too many people, let most of them out. Now, he won't be stupid enough to say let's let out terrorists and serial killers and the worst of the worst. But I find it troubling that his attitude is we're too focused on punishment in this country. I don't agree with that. And even if it were true, punishment has a very specific purpose in justice, holding the criminal to account for what they have done. So if Timpson has a problem with that, I do question his moral compass when it comes to understanding how victims of crime feel and what they want. They want offenders to be held to account. You know, if there's cases here and unquestionably some of these people being released will reoffend. In the case of those who are homeless, they may actually reoffend in order to get a roof over their head. Now, that's something that needs to be considered. They're going to have to find them some sort of hostels or something. Because if they just go back to the streets, they may go back to shoplifting or whatever for survival. And I'm not saying it's an excuse, but there is that situation to deal with. Um, that case about the murder in Newcastle where the killer was just charged with manslaughter and he's got less than 2 years, if I've understood that correctly. I'll just reread this. Lawson 80, convicted of manslaughter over he was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months, is out. Um, so that's about 2 years he served or less. If it was late 2022, that's less than 2 years for killing someone. Even by the standards of soft justice Britain, that is a disgrace. And so I do question how some of these decisions have been made. Now, I would say if you're going to release people early, it should be non-violent offenders. if you're going to release people early, some of the financial crimes, some drug offences. I mean, if someone is in jail for taking drugs, they should be released unless they have posed a violent threat to the public. Not drug dealers, although some of them are included in the release. It's this arbitrary sort of thing of if the sentence is less than 2 years, but they're not taking into account what sort of sentence that is. Excuse me, what sort of offence that is. It's just like, okay, if the sentence is less than 2 years, we'll deem them to be less serious. But some of these are very serious offences. I mean, violent assault is not a trivial thing, you know. Taking someone's life is hardly a small crime. So I think a lot of the public is going to be justifiably concerned what sort of people are being let out onto the streets again. Yvette Cooper has to answer that. She has to explain about what sort of safeguards are being put in place. Okay, so Labour say they've got no choice to do this. That may or may not be true. I think some of it is ideological, given that Timpson, as prisons minister, is on record as saying we're too fond of punishment in this country. So Labour is saying officially, oh, we've no choice, we have to do this. But I wonder, is some of it ideological? I.e., you get liberal left people like Timpson who want to release criminals early, actually want to do it, rather than being, oh, we've got no choice. So I do think some of it is ideological. Um, and, the cynical part of me thinks Labour's just got 1,700 new votes. I don't know if anyone could do a study on what criminals tend to vote for, but certainly criminals will be pretty happy with the Labour Party over this. So I think what the government needs to do, if they insist that this is necessary, what they have to do is go overtime on reassuring the public that safeguards are being put into place. So these people are out. Are they going to get ankle tags? Are they going to be monitored by the police for every move they make? It has to be that way because otherwise you're going to get another one of these people will commit a serious crime and people will say that was an avoidable situation. In terms of the overcrowding situation, the answer has to be building new prison places. I don't think the answer is let's jail fewer people because dangerous people should be behind bars. The public have a right to be protected. If anything, there may be some offences that people shouldn't go to jail for. I don't think anyone should be in prison for not paying their TV license. Even if it's stubborn, even if they haven't paid it 10 years in a row, give them a hefty fine, make them do community service, something like that. That shouldn't be a prisonable offence. I think drug use for the individual shouldn't be an imprisonable offence. And some of the financial crimes. Now, again, it depends. If someone has stolen a pensioner's life savings, that may not have involved violence, but that's a pretty damaging crime. I think they should be in prison for that. So, naturally, it turns my stomach the idea that some of these people have done terrible things and they're gloating about early release. Labour must know the optics of that. They acknowledge that it's unpopular. They say it's necessary. Okay, it may be necessary, but they have to do two things. They have to reassure the public that safeguards are being put in place, and they have to also lay out a concrete plan for how more prison spaces are going to be built. Because otherwise, you're flip flopping on this issue. During the campaign, Labour explicitly stated they would build 20,000 new prison places. Now they're saying, oh, we need to look at how we enact justice and we should free more people. So I wonder how much influence Timpson has on Starmer because Starmer, the prosecutor, made a big thing about being tough on crime, but he has a prisons minister who, in my opinion, is soft on crime. That's a contradiction, and if that Starmer said he was very proud of that appointment, I've big question marks over Mr. Timpson because of the things he's come out with. Um, so I think there is an ideological factor there. So, in summary, I accept that this may have been a necessary move as awful as it is, but I do question some of the people that have come out. Could they not have released non-violent offenders who perhaps had less prolific offences, a less prolific build-up of offences? Could they not have released some people on less serious financial crimes? I think just looking at it, oh, they've a sentence of less than 4 years, so it must be a lesser crime. Some of these are very serious crimes. I mean, that's flawed in the first place because most of the public would say their initial sentence, even if they'd done the full term, was too soft to begin with. This idea, I mean, the whole concept of early release, even before The prison overcrowding situation is grotesque. It's dishonest. It's one of those things that makes the public infuriated with the justice establishment. Someone gets 9 years for an offence, they'll be out in 6.5. So it's dishonest. A life sentence is not a life sentence. The vast majority of life sentences is the person will do maybe 20 years in prison and then they'll come out and, you know, justice establishment will say, oh, technically it is a life sentence because they'll be on, they'll be watched for the rest of their life. But whole life tariffs are very, very rarely given. So I think we need to change some of the terminology to be more honest. The public are sick of it. Um, this is one thing I think there's just such a detachment from the legal establishment opinion. I've been saying this for years because I believe that to be the case. Um, I have a lot of sympathy for people who would have been the direct victims or relatives of the victims of the criminals who are being released. Those criminals themselves, if I was a journalist, I would say to them as they're celebrating, do you have any remorse? Do you have anything to say to your victim? Don't just, I would ruin their moment. I would say, right, you're celebrating today. Do you have anything you'd like to say to your victim? I'd put them on the spot. I think it's pretty disgusting that they're gloating about it. I mean, yeah, I'd be happy if I got out of prison, right? It's a human reaction. But if they have any remorse, they would show a bit more humility, I think. In terms of the long term solution. It isn't going to happen overnight, but Labour has to build more prison places. A, they said they would do it, and B, I do not think that the answer to prison overcrowding is let's jail fewer people. Let's look like the Netherlands. That model will never work in Britain because people would not accept it. People do not want the idea of remorseless criminals getting a tap on the wrist doing community sentences. Dangerous people should be kept away from the public. That is the point of prison. It's not a punitive punishment. It actually does serve a purpose. Um, you cannot have violent, dangerous people free to walk around, and a community sentence just doesn't cut it. Because if they even bother showing up to that community sentence, I don't think they take it seriously. Some may, some may, that might be enough for them to change their ways. But unfortunately, I think a lot of criminals in this country are utterly remorseless. This guy, 109 offences. Now, does anyone seriously think that releasing him early is always going to see the light? Someone like this needs to be in prison for a much longer term and heavily curtailed when he comes out. So it's the thing is we're early in a parliamentary in this parliament, so I don't think this will go against Labour in whenever the next election is 2028 or 2029. Probably people will have forgotten it by then. So in a way, Labour's lucky that this is happening early on their term because by 2028, this will be a backstory. But it isn't a backstory to victims of crime. So Cooper needs to give people reassurance. She needs to say, yes, we've made this unpopular decision, but we're going to put solid safeguards in place. These people are going to be monitored. They're going to be brought straight back to prison if they violate it, etc. There has to be those safeguards. She needs to reassure people instead of telling the police to spend more time on non-crime hate incidents. I'm not impressed by Labour on crime. The only good thing they've done so far is taking a hard line on the summer's riots. Which incidentally, I'll just mention one thing. Um, this homeless inmate might end up in a hotel. Well, I wonder will far right rioters target the hotel because criminals are in it, or is it only foreigners they have a problem with? It'd be good if they showed some consistency. Their issue is about they believe that migrants are all criminals. So if there are issues with criminals, are they going to target British criminals as well? Probably not, because they are British criminals. The ringleader, of course, or one of the ringleaders in the Rotherham riot, got 9 years. One of the rioters in Sunderland was explicitly charged with the offence of riot as opposed to just disorderly conduct. It was on the local news tonight. I'm pleased to see that because my city was hard hit by those riots. I'll wrap this up. But yeah, it may have been a necessary move, but Labour needs to do a lot more to give the public reassurance.